Hey guys, welcome to a new video. आज का वीडियो काफी इंटरेस्टिंग होगा because we're gonna be talking about Intel versus AMD. Now we know this video has been done a lot of times by multiple people. कोई गेमिंग की बात कर रहा है, कोई एडिटिंग की बात कर रहा है. ये आपको ये करवा देगा, ये आपको वो करवा देगा. But we are not going to be talking about that exactly. What we're going to be talking about why AMD is better if at all, and why Intel is better for its own reasons. So stay tuned. Watch till the end. तो बात करते हैं Intel versus AMD की. Now there is no secret that AMD has been taking the performance crown from Intel very recently with their 5000 launches. Now let's actually discuss कि why AMD is succeeding and why that performance crown is going away. So on a very basic level, point 1 से शुरू करते हैं. Now the point 1 is chip design. In itself ये एक बहुत बड़ा vast topic है. I mean, I'll try to make it sound easy. Hopefully you guys can follow me. So here goes nothing. Now Intel की बात शुरू करते हैं. Now Intel has actually something called a monolithic design. Now monolithic design exactly क्या होता है? Now monolithic design means its I/O part, its chip part वगैरह वगैरह जो भी processor के parts होते हैं, to put it very very simply, will be on the same die. Now since they're on the same die, the latency between them will be very less. That is why Intel has always been great in their latency based applications. जैसे कि gaming होगी, gaming always needs less latency. Since all the cores, the cache, the I/O are on the same die, the obvious advantage is lower latency. Now since lower latency from chipset level is going on, it means your applications will run faster, you will get higher boost clocks and so on and so forth. लेकिन इसमें एक प्रॉब्लम है. Now monolithic design का प्रॉब्लम ये है कि when you're trying to manufacture a higher number of cores वाला processor, your yield goes down drastically. That's another reason why Intel hasn't been able to give us 8, 16 and 18 core वाले processor for the longest time. Because अगर आप 3-4 साल पहले चले जाओ, 7700K was a 4 core i7 and there was nothing above that because it was very very simple for them to do this. On the other hand, if you look at the Xeon ranges, the reason why they're so expensive is the yield actually goes down to up to 50%. Meaning, if you're trying to manufacture 100 Xeons, you're kind of wasting 50 Xeons and throwing them away. Because since all the cores on the same die, and even if one core is defective, you are left with a useless chip itself. So you throw that away. That's why yield monolithic design में कम होती है जब आप core count बढ़ाते हो. So now that's a problem for Intel to solve. Hopefully they solve it soon. Now let's move on to how AMD is different in their design. So AMD design is actually a different design. Thanks Musa bhai. That explains a lot. नहीं, वो actually different है. It's a chiplet based design, otherwise known as MCM design. Now what happens in a chiplet based design is the chip's I/O part is separate and it has छोटू chiplets. Chiplets नहीं बोलेंगे, उसको CCX बोलते हैं. Core complex. Now 2 CCXs make up 1 CCD, which is a core complex die. So for a 16 core 5950X, AMD is going to have 2 CCDs and 1 I/O part. So it's a distributed kind of a design. These all sit on an infinity fabric, जिससे communication between these chips, between the CCD and the I/O happens. Now एक chip का I/O क्या करता है? आपका SATA ports, आपका PCI lanes, उसका communication करता है. Now on AMD chip design ये I/O part 12 नैनोमीटर का है, लेकिन जो CCX है वो है 7 नैनोमीटर का. Now the good thing with this CCX is, now the CCX has just 4 cores. Now each CCD can host up to 2 CCXs. Wow, this is getting weird. But जिसका मतलब 8 core. 8 core plus 8 core हो गए 16 core हो गया 5950X. Now the advantage with the CCX based design is आपका yield हमेशा मस्त रहने वाला है. Since you're only making a 4 core chiplet. Now chiplet plus chiplet plus chiplet plus chiplet बन गया CPU. That is why AMD का design काफ़ी अच्छा है in terms of yield. They can mass produce. Also with their design, if they can just disable एक CCX का एक core, एक CCX का एक core, उनका बन गया 6 core का 5600X. It's as simple as that. इतना आसान काम हो गया AMD के लिए. That is why they're able to churn this out sooner and faster. One interesting thing about AMD is they are a fabless company. मतलब उनका अपना फाउंड्री नहीं है, They do not own their own factory. They do the design work and they pass it on to TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which is actually the people manufacturing it for them. In a previous video, we have talked about TSMC delaying everyone's stuff. So yeah, blame TSMC if you're not getting your parts on time. A chiplet based design has an inherent weakness. Now what is that inherent weakness? क्या है weakness? Weakness ये है कि boss, now since all the cores are not sitting on exactly the same die, you will have inherent latency issues because they are communicating through the infinity fabric. तो obviously latency issue वाला है. Now what did AMD do to counter this? Now initially in Zen 2, what AMD did was they increased the L3 cache. ये आपने notice किया होगा. AMD processors, their entire range of processors have a larger cache, L3 cache than any other competitor. It's simply to reduce latency. Now to improve that further, in the 5000 series उन्होंने क्या किया? They are allowing all 8 cores on a CCD to communicate with the entire L3 cache. Earlier it was split, 4 core 16 MB यूज कर रहे हैं, 4 core 16 MB यूज कर रहे हैं. अब सारा कुछ 32 MB, all 8 cores are communicating directly, so the latency is further reduced. Apart from this, they have done multiple optimizations on this, and hence they are getting that 19% IPC uplift. IPC क्या है? Instructions per clock. In other words, proportionally it's increasing their performance. Now the interesting part to note is the person behind these efficiencies and the increase in AMD का भारी भरकम processors is not Lisa Su, it's actually Jim Keller, legend भाई साहब है वो. He's worked in Intel, he's worked in AMD, he's worked in Apple, and wherever he has gone, I mean, he's kind of a rock star chip designer. I strongly suggest for people interested, they can actually read up about him and how he took Ryzen to where it is. He kind of incepted the whole Ryzen series. So yeah, worth a read, legend. Talking further about AMD and Intel, there's a big reason why AMD might actually hold on to their lead. Simply because AMD हर चीज़ में है. आज की तारीख में AMD सब चीज़ में है, like Xbox में है, PS5 में है, of course PCs में तो है ही. The market share lead has been increasing quarter by quarter. Intel परेशान, हैरान, लेकिन AMD is actually gaining great on them. तो सवाल ये उठता है कि why will they gain if just Xbox PS5 में वो लोग हैं. सिंपली पुट, जो गेमिंग पार्ट है, लोगों का गेमिंग पार्ट, गेमिंग एंगल से अगर इसको देखेंगे कि ऑल द गेम्स डिजाइंड फॉर अ मल्टी प्लेटफॉर्म रिलीज are going to be optimized for something of a Ryzen based processor, because both Xbox and PS5 have Ryzen based 8 core processors and GPUs in them. So the optimization part for the developers becomes easier, which means you may start seeing games which utilize the multi-core very very well, और finally शायद 4 core से ज़्यादा यूज़ करना शुरू करेंगे games with this new generation. From the other angle, if you look at it from the productivity angle, now of course more cores means more multitasking. I mean, if you're a streamer, you use those extra 2 cores to stream your game. I mean, if you're somewhat of a video editor, जो हमारा है video editor, जो वो extra core में आपकी rendering तेज होगी. If you're a VFX guy, now your single core performance also is amazing. So your viewport is amazing, your rendering is amazing. Overall, it's really brilliant. I mean, there's nothing beating AMD right now. But now what has happened? Sorry?
Why are we using it?
Budget issues, dude. Come on. Like, share, subscribe for budget. To finally conclude this video, now the challenge is up for Intel, how they sort their manufacturing processes out. If you didn't already know, they've been on a 14 nanometer manufacturing process for the longest time, जिसकी वजह से वो ज़्यादा कुछ उखाड़ नहीं पा रहे हैं. They're trying to increase their IPC, they're trying to increase their boost clocks. Now if you look at it, 10th generation Intel CPUs kind of run hot. Actually they do, they throttle. Even a 360mm cooler is sometimes not enough for the i9s. So yeah, they have a challenge going on. They need to sort their production out. I mean, they need to reduce their process node. They've been trying for 10 nanometer, वो give up हो गया है. अब वो नहीं कर पा रहे, नहीं हो पा रहा है. AMD का advantage ये है कि they don't have to worry about the production. They're just buying capacity from TSMC and churning out processors. पर problem ये हो रहा है कि now that AMD knows that they are the best in town, उनका price भी best in town हो गया है. They are really high. On the other hand, for us consumers, the interesting thing is Intel ने price गिरा दिया है. चॉइस नहीं था उनके पास, उनको बेचना है तो प्राइस गिराना ही था. प्राइस गिर चुका है, इंटेल खरीदने के लिए एक्चुअली अच्छी डील है, स्पेशली इन द एंट्री लेवल रेंजेस. इफ यू लुक एट एन i3 10100F or an i5 10600, it's obviously a better deal than 5600, not in terms of performance but in terms of performance per rupee spent. So that way Intel is still holding its own. I mean focus टास्क के लिए कि आपको पता है कि आप सिर्फ गेम खेलने वाले हो, तो I mean it's a no brainer, you can actually go for Intel as well. But if you're the kind of person who is like नहीं मुझे बेस्ट चीज़ चाहिए, बेस्ट चीज़ तो is AMD. Team Red is leading, so yeah, the task is cut out for Intel to beat them. Then we are highly excited. There's going to be some announcements in Feb or March regarding Intel new processors coming in, so stay tuned for that. We'll be covering this on our channel. Hope you like watching this video. Hope it was educational. हम try करते हैं कि like you get something out of watching our video and not just watch some parts on the screen. Actually पीछे का build मस्त है. Shipping out today. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome to a new video. एक और वीडियो, एक और. हर बार मैं आ जाता हूँ जल्दी करने, नहीं. ओके, एक और ज्ञान पेलो सेशन में आपका स्वागत है.